Welcome to Heaven's Edge. Platform of nutrient exchange is appropriate for your life form.
An ale, I guess?
Sympathizing ale?
Alright, thanks. Let's try it. It's actually pretty good.
Attention Spacers, welcome back to another thrilling episode of Adventures in the Void. We are a sci-fi tabletop role-playing game discussion transmission. I am Jake.
And I'm Ross.
Join us as we trade tales and celebrate the beauty and wonder of the cosmos.
Hello and welcome back to the Adventures in the Void Spacecast. My name is Ross McClure. Here at the Spacecast, we chat about folk tabletop role-playing games. This season, specifically indie science fiction tabletop role-playing games. Now, as we've said before, folk tabletop role-playing games, that's just a way of distinguishing this locus of what's right. What does right look like for the table? And for this, it comes from the table. Not brands or companies, products, voices on the internet. We love companies and products and voices on the internet, but it comes from the table. But today, I've got a voice on the internet with me. Also a novelist, tabletop role-playing game adventure writer and designer, but he's probably best known for his discussion and ideas videos, things like the RPG Social Contract, which I have adapted for every game since I have seen it. Game Master Burnout, how to start a new RPG with your group, problem and difficult players, problem and difficult GMs. Chances are, if there's a trouble out there that someone has with tabletop role-playing, Seth Skorkowsky's got an advice video that you could watch about it. And Seth does this with a positive and calm personality, and there's a ton of entertainment value, a cast of interesting characters that he provides this advice with, and it's all set over his experience with mostly skill-based RPGs, which we'll talk about. Though his advice, I would say, is useful for any tabletop role-playing game. Welcome to the podcast, Seth.
Oh, thank you for having me. Man, that was a really good intro.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Hope I can live up to
that. Yeah. So jumping right in. So I know that some of these things you've talked about in other interviews, but just for our audience, your starting point with your group, that was what, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons? Was that kind of, where you all started?
Yeah, my I started back in like the early 90s when the Black Box Basic released. And I got that. It's like a little adventure you can adventure yourself through. It was like right after that. I was at a Boy Scout meeting. I was telling my friend all about this game. And this kid like that I've never really talked to walks up, is like, that's not how elves work. And it ends up that he plays.
So it has been ever since. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. My first time I met a gamer, I got corrected. But it's because he played Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, what?
Oh.
And his dad had been playing since the 70s. And so we ended up forming a group. It ended up becoming one of my good buddies really quickly. And so we started playing, and the 2E had been out for like a year, I guess. And our GM's like, I've got all the books. I'm not buying new books. Go to used bookstores and garage sales and get a bunch of first edition books. So we played 1E, AD&D, and then like 2E kind of bled. That's just what I played. So when I went off to college and I formed my own group, same thing. I played my 1E, 2E hybrid for years and years and years. The 3E came out, and I played that for a bit, and then we went right back to our 1E, 2E hybrid because I understood the rules. I had mastered it. And it was also our giant patchwork of house rules and all that stuff. I think the hardest part of converting editions is letting go of all your cool house rules.
Yeah, I mean, you have your edition, yeah, and then you. Okay, so you all are playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, like back in the '90s and stuff. And now, in your videos, which I'd like to kind of talk about this. I don't know what to call it. Part of the hobby. I don't know, but like, you'll talk about a concept and then you'll introduce like a black and white screen with some characters and you'll display it. It's almost like an example of play, that actually plays out in the video. And when you do that, people will see things like Cyberpunk. They'll see Call of Cthulhu, modern role-playing games. Okay, so for people that are listening to podcasts,
way of advertising all the other games.
Yeah, there's other games, and of course, anybody who's been listening to the podcast knows that. That's kind of our whole thing, is talking about, just different stuff that's out there. But I'm curious, can you? I don't know if this is a big ask to do, but could you encapsulate? You have a video called Class versus Skill Based. I don't know if that completely sums the whole thing up, but you all made this transition, right? And first of all, what was that game, and what was that point? What was that? Hey, there's this other thing. What is that other thing? And then for everyone else out there, what is that like? What's that about? These games like Call of Cthulhu and Cyberpunk and Traveler.
Okay. Well, so I was a massive D&D fan, like the insufferable type. It's like it's the perfect game, and everything else is a crappy wannabe because D&D was first, therefore it's best. And I haven't looked at the others, but I'm going to speak as if I know what I'm talking about. That insufferable fanboy, that was me. And the one area that I knew D&D lacking when it came to science fiction. So we tried a little Star Frontiers, except my normal DM Star Frontiers, I didn't. It had been out of print for a while, so I couldn't just run that on the side because I didn't have the books. So I tried to dip my toe into MechWarrior game off the ground, and then about the time I'm 18, I'm deep in the punk rock scene, and I was introduced to Cyberpunk by a friend of mine who also got me into William Gibson and all that. So Cyberpunk was awesome. It was like RoboCop and all this. And
wow, yeah.
it was also very violent. Death was like one bullet will kill you. And your SMG can pump out 20, 25 bullets. One could kill you. And it was very different. But since D&D was all that I knew, whenever we would do a little side game with Cyberpunk, we played it pretty much like we would play D&D. And we didn't really think too much about the fact that everything else about the system was completely different because it was a skill-based game. And so we had a couple little side games of this, so we'd have fun. But they were just the side game, the thing you do on the side. We've actually got a main AD&D campaign going on at all times. And then I was 2008 hit full D&D burnout. Like it's done. It was done.
This was 2008.
And
okay,
I'm like, because they were getting high level, they were getting that point where they kind of start becoming invincible. And nothing threatened them. They started playing poorly. They no longer had fear of threat because it's like we've got so many healing, we got so much hit points, our AC is so good. The story's old as D&D, and that mixed with just a bunch of other kind of just exhaustion frustrations because I've been playing it for at that point 17 years, and I said we're going to play Cyberpunk. I went out and actually got all the rest of the Cyberpunk books I didn't, and we started looking at it as our primary. We started looking at it as our primary, then started kind of testing for what it could do. That's when we suddenly realized that, oh, the classes are more of suggestions. They're not actually classes like you would have and it was doing a lot of the stuff that we had been trying to house rule. We had been trying to house rule in more non-weapon proficiencies and all these other aspects to our D&D game. It wasn't recognizable at D&D anymore at that point, but and then there was a fan mod called Interlock Unlimited that pretty much took the Cyberpunk 2020 rules and they turned it into a more generic game that you could drop into any setting, and that really blew open the doors for us. So we played fantasy with it. We did basically played Call of Cthulhu with it, like 30s pulp investigative stuff, and we'd always say stuff like, "Man, you know that one time we did like this theme game in D&D where they were all basically a traveling minstrel group. Like, this would have been so amazing. It's like a skill-based game. Actually, this time we just called it Interlock. We hadn't realized that there were a lot of other skill-based games yet. And AV came out. We played that for a year, and very quickly felt so limited by the fact there are classes. And you kind of realized that death in that game is kind of an achievement because the risk isn't as much as we had been used to in a game that was very lethal. And that's when Call of Cthulhu 7e came out, and I read that, and I was just in love. After that, we just started exploring a ton of other games and going out. But the core difference between a skill-based, to finally answer your question here, is D&D, we all know, as a class. Like, you're a thief, you're a wizard, fighter, barbarian, whatever. And as you hit a certain number of XPs, you get some more hit points, you get a couple bonuses here, you get to choose between these abilities you might get or these new spells. And a skill-based game is pretty much like they're all open, all available to you. Build the character you want. You are not stuck into class holds. Might be archetypes. Those aren't the same as a class, because it's like, I'm going to be a pulp. I'm going to be a gritty noir detective. Okay, what does that mean to you? And then you kind of build your gritty noir detective, but it's not like you always have smoke cigars and like carry a revolver or some skill. It's just, it's more of like kind of like suggestions versus, and they tend to be much more, I don't know, deadly. Like you don't suddenly get like that 100 XPs or something. It's, at the beginning, a bullet can kill you. After 15 adventures, a bullet can kill you. You don't suddenly become impervious to damage. That's one of the things we loved, is it's always dangerous.
So you're talking about like the difference between class and skill-based RPGs. You had this experience where they're first of all, it sounds like you have more choice. So there's that.
Yeah.
In a class-based game, you're a cleric. Wait, you're a cleric, but your wisdom is an 8. Wait, why would you do that? And then everybody's depending on you, and there's this what do you call it, niche protection, right? Like where it's like, well, hey, we need you to be the cleric. We need you to do this. And it sounds like in this game you can kind of be the detective that you want to be.
You can be whatever you want, and there's not that limitation. There isn't a. There's the role of like we have to have a tank, we have to have a healer. It's like everybody can do all that. And they might choose their focus, but you could also get to get like, oh, I'm gonna switch my focus. I also like games where your skills go up individually versus you get so many XPs, or if you do this milestone thing, all of a sudden like you get this block of kind of things that you can choose from. Versus every adventure, as you do it, your abilities and your skills that you're using are getting better. Is also the one that I really love. Is if you use it, it gets better. Is my favorite method,
right.
Because that's where you end up with those surprise things, where like you've got that character that doesn't think of themselves as the healer, but they're actually always doing it. And all of a sudden, like, their healing is through the roof. Like, well, I don't know how that happens. Like, well, I can tell you. You're always the first to jump down and try to heal.
Wow.
Where it's like...
I mean, talk about, like, we talk about emergent narrative, where we don't know what the story will end up being. What about emergent character skill? What? Like, you don't even know going in what you're going to end up... Wow.
yeah, like I remember in that video I talked about that because like in our group,
Right.
it was actually my wife. She's like, I'm not playing the healer this time. I'm not getting healing. And nobody got healing because nobody thinks about it because they're so used to her doing it. And but even though she's like, I don't want to be the healer, she still is naturally the one that thinks maybe we should keep so and so alive. And so she would like attempt to heal them, but her skill was at base, which like Call of Cthulhu was like 25-30% or something. But as she did it more and more, it got better. So she never intended to, but the fact that that's how she still plays, that emerged from it. So you've got the character who does like to, shoot the rifle or punch somebody in the face or whatever skill. Whether they gave their character those skills or not at the beginning, they kind of end up appearing and getting better and better. Whether the player is intentionally wanting. They say, I think of myself as a sniper. It's like, well, survey says you punch people because that's what's gotten really good. You started off with a great rifle and you've never used it, but
Yeah.
you use all this
So
other
it sounds
stuff.
it sounds like this is almost a little more like realistic, or like in like a real life kind of thing. And I want to ask about this because I think a lot of people, this is a barrier, and I don't know, maybe it's a barrier like, hey, just take the risk and take the jump, But I encounter this with skill-based games, alternative types of Free League makes these amazing story games. They're very well put together, but hey, they're lethal, like Mutineer Zero and Blade Runner. Like they're lethal, So it's not just like an old school Dungeons and Dragons thing. It's also like, I don't know, a lot of games out there out of the brand name game, like that's a part of it. So let's just say, now I heard you say, hey, you can use this skill-based setup for fantasy, but let's just say you're not, and you're coming into, so that answers the genre question. You're going to go into Call of Cthulhu, and if you have a horror game, there should be this sense of uncertainty. Like otherwise, it's very hard. How can you have a horror game without that? But I think still the reticence I hear whenever I mention lethality is, but I want to invest in my character. I want to see them. I don't just want it to end abruptly or capriciously. I want to see this play out. I want to see more. And the player seems to stand to lose more from a death than the character does. How do you answer that lethality question, since it kind of got brought up? Because it sounds like that's a feature of the game. Why would it be fun? Yeah, for to face your certain death in Call of Cthulhu or
So when we flip to Call of Cthulhu, there's always a joke about, like, oh yeah, you die all the time and stuff. And my players didn't. Their characters were actually very well long lived.
Right.
It's because we were used to skill-based games. We had been playing a cyberpunk system for, I don't know, like 6 years before we flipped to Call of Cthulhu. And we're like, oh yeah, we're old hats at this. When the bullets start flying, you duck, and you scramble, and they start thinking a lot more strategic. It's like, in D&D, it's one of those, like, a lot of people talk about, it stops being as much fun once they get to like 8th level, because all of a sudden they're like, they're so powerful, they stop playing smart. It was like, man, when they're like 1st, 2nd level, they play like so smart. And it's like, yeah, because they know they're vulnerable. They know that one orc could take them out. So they're not just reckless, and they're constantly aware that there is this risk. And finally, when they take down that one orc or that one wolf, they're so proud because they knew what the risk was. But then they get up to like 8th level, and they scatter every direction. Like, I'll take the 15 over here, you take the
right
over there, and they're lobbing fireballs willy-nilly. And at half the time, the GM was kind of watching them get their butts kicked, going like, what happened to the strategic players I had like 6 months ago? Like half of this was preventable. And with the skill-based games that I do, that risk is always there. And it's like, I don't want my character to die. It's like, good. I don't want your character to die. I want your character to survive and see how they go. But that rush that you made it through is so good. And part of what finally caused us to just walk away from 5e was this. We suddenly realized that death in that game, we kind of felt was just an achievement. Like they kind of started feeling immortal. And when they realized that the risk wasn't as much as they thought it was, their pride and their accomplishments dimmed. Because it's like, oh, we really didn't pull ourselves out of the fire that as well as we thought we did. Because it's so hard to actually die in that game. And I think somebody who plays only 5e is like, what? Like, yeah. But
yeah, because I mean, you maybe you just want that, and that's fine, right? Like,
and that's a cool type of thing if that's what you like. But it is very superhero-y.
Right, and that's just because I think people get it whenever I pitch that, and I'm like, look, if you want really a Lovecraftian horror experience, we can do this. It's going to be fun, but you need to actually be afraid. You need to not know. And then their one kind of the main reticence is I'll lose my character, and that's been my observation as well. We ran Old School Essentials for 14 months. There were characters that had 2 hit points. They didn't die, and it's because and I think that I think we underestimate, some people do, how this stuff really can influence people, like the group dynamics and stuff. There's this group dynamic part. If you have 2 hit points but your friends are depending on you, you'll change what you do because you want to help your friends and you want to see how the story comes out, and then your experience will change, and I've found that to be nearly completely reliable, and anyways, no characters died for 13 out of 14 months with one starting at 2 hit points.
That's kind of like I was for Call of Cthulhu with this, where it's like, because they had gone through the learning curve with other skill-based games, they understood mortality. So they flipped to like, okay guys, one good hit could kill any of us. So we're going to work together, and we're going to play smart, and we're immediately going to teamwork. And a lot of people, they'll try it out, but they're coming from D&D or some other game where you're kind of the superhero. And they immediately get killed. And so a lot of times, when we have flipped to a new game, one of our jokes is, your first characters are probably going to be fodder, because by the time they get slaughtered, we'll know what to do and what not to do. And how often those end up actually living for a long time, but we make them with the initial, like, this is just an experiment. We're going to learn how the game works through them. And then after they're gone, we're going to make the good character that we know how to make better. And then we end up with that one living for a long, long time. So it's like, well, okay, well, hey, the odds are stacked against him because we had no idea what we were doing when we put this character together.
Yeah, okay, so you maybe start out with a little prequel game. My friend just did that recently. We had like a little prequel to the game, and then we set, and it was took place like 50 years before what was going to happen or whatever, and that way people can try it out. That's a good idea. So you're saying skill-based, is it fair to call them skill-based games? Is this a good category for games? Yeah,
and the thing is, man, what makes it skill-based is sometimes like there's a lot of games that have a lot of gray zone, but it's like they're still skill-based, even if they do have some archetypes. Like Cyberpunk 2020 is technically a skill-based game, but it has classes.
Right.
On the overall, it's a skill-based game.
And when we talk about skill-based, what we mean is Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to have clerics, fighters. You're going to have classes, and there's these big archetypes, and they're going to define how you progress throughout the whole game, and really what you can do. And a fighter can hit things, and a wizard can cast spells. But in Traveler, instead of having this big robust list of, well, you're a belter, so because you're a belter, you can do this, 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 and this. Instead, you have a big block. And the block is just a list of all the science fiction technical skills, like operating computers and electrical stuff and piloting spacecraft, and it's just got a big list. And generally speaking, at least this is my observation, you're looking at numbers. You're gonna add it. You're gonna have a 3 in this, or you're gonna have a 1 in the, or whatever. And anyways, there's a whole class of games out there that kind of focus on that. Of course, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition has a skill list, and it does that. It has numbers that you add to Arcana and stuff, but it's small and and it's sort of bolted on. I would say it's not, in my opinion, the focus of how that game works.
It is, and I've had people say, "Well, D&D has skills." It's like it's the difference between having skills and being skill based. It's kind of like a 747 has wheels, but I wouldn't call it a ground based transport. It's like it's an air based transport that also just happens to have some wheels, but it's not. It's focus,
right?
And that's kind of how like skills in D&D are. They're there. They're kind of important, but they're not actually what the focus of the whole thing is about. It's just a thing that's also there.
Yeah. So these skill-based games, it sounds like more realistic, more like you're a real person in that world, and so you have to approach things cautiously. I'm hearing you say, like, it sounds like it encourages investigation and circumspection and seeking information as a character, and instead of laying down or conveying some ability or power, you have to interrogate the world and try to figure out what's going on and survive, and that's thrilling. And and I've seen in your videos there's cyberpunk, which you've described like, you said it was kind of like RoboCop. And that, by the way, I think is something you do in your videos that's really great, is you use touchstones. I sometimes forget to do that. Like Firefly, you're like, this is how I sold it to my group. And when you said it and you were like, it's Firefly, but with aliens, I was like, I want to play it now. And you do that with, like, in your Call of Cthulhu, you were like, it's, a dark 1930s pulp noir, but,
it's the Maltese Falcon. If the Maltese Falcon had actually had magic.
That's awesome. That is so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So now I want to play Call of Cthulhu. Dang, the curse of this. But anyways, so we got cyberpunk. You said it's like RoboCop. You got Call of Cthulhu, which is H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah, Maltese Falcon, but with magic. And then you've covered Traveler, which. I guess a good touchstone. It's like Firefly, but with aliens. So here's some big ones. I will put those in the description. Actually, I want people, like, if you haven't looked into those big 3, man, those are the 3 big ones, like, to check out. We cover a lot of Traveler. We alternate episodes between a Traveler actual play, actually, and then like a discussion. So if people listen to season 2, they're going to hear our Traveler game. What are we missing? Are there any other big ones that we should put in the description?
Out of the ones I play, I also play Cultivating Lost, but it's like hyper niche. Is like the most niche game I play.
What's it about?
It is a horror game. It is
okay.
It's a Swedish horror game. So if you know,
no.
that means it is darker than dark. It's Swedish. It's pretty much how, like, people are like, how dark is it? Swedish. And it's very much like a lot of the writing of Clive Barker, right? Hellbound Heart, Lord of Illusions, where the characters are slowly realizing that their world is actually an illusion, and we are trapped in a prison. It's Gnosticism.
That is awesome.
Like the Matrix, but instead of it being a bunch of computers that have imprisoned us, it's these, like, demons and fallen angels, and we are actually gods that have forgotten our own divinity, and we are in a prison.
All right, you gotta quit. Now I gotta play this game. Gosh, that's so cool.
And it's weird. It's niche. It's dark. It is not for everybody. I love it. I love it so much.
That's so cool. And who's the publisher of Cult of Divinity Lost?
Helmgast, which is a little little Swedish one. They do some distribution through Modifius, but
Okay.
it's a company called Helmgast, and it's the fourth edition of that game. It originally came out in the 90s. The current edition is actually using a form of the Powered by the Apocalypse system, which is like a totally different, almost game design theory,
Right.
conventional role-playing games, which also turns a lot of people off because it is not crunchy in a way, but it's also it's a very different game. But
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and I will include that. That man, that sounds so cool. Okay. So, now we've been covering Traveler here a lot. You do advice videos, kind of in the backdrop of these dramatized examples, and then you can see either AD&D or Call of Cthulhu or something in the background when the gang is playing a game, but you also write and have created adventures. I know recently for Mongoose you've done content. When did you start work? And Mongoose, Mongoose Publishing is one of the license holders for Traveler. There are kind of two main DNA strands of Traveler today. I would say one is from Far Future Enterprises, who is the main creator of Traveler, Mark Miller. And he has a Traveler game, and then you have Mongoose Traveler Second Edition with the 2022 update, which is kind of their current Traveler game. And I would say it's something we always talk about as a touchstone. It's almost like what D&D 5e is for fantasy. My friend Father Chris and I continually go back to Mongoose Second Edition almost as like the D&D 5e of sci-fi. It's like our touchstone for things. Very well put together modern RPG. When did you start working with Mongoose and start working on Traveler products?
Well, I'm trying to think. So I never played Traveler. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know much about it. I did a review for Paranoia, the Red Clearance edition of Paranoia. And
Okay.
that was one of my earlier videos. It got a little traffic, not much. It was like a year and a half later. Mass Branch with Mongoose saw it and left it because I did the whole I dressed up in little costumes and all that stuff.
Right.
And so he reaches out to me and he's like, hey, I want to sing you some games. And I gave him my standard spiel of I'm not going to review it unless I play it. I'm not going to play it unless it looks like it's a good fit for us and it can fit in our play schedule. Yada yada yada. 99% of the stuff that I am offered or sent is never going to get played, either because of time or it's just not our thing. And it's just because we're just a regular group that plays. The GM just also happens to review it, and he ended up hitting a very golden, perfect moment, and that was we had finished our big Pulp Cthulhu campaign, and I did a palette cleanse because I wasn't sure what we wanted to do for our next long game. So we did a palette cleanse of something totally different. We played Conan from Modifius, and it was like we're gonna do 3 adventures just to get this kind of pulpy horror game out of our way, and then we'll play something else. And I'd really been wanting sci-fi, and Cyberpunk Red hadn't come out yet, which because we're Cyberpunk players, we're looking for the new edition, and I hadn't really found anything that really appealed to me. And so that happened to hit me right when I was A, looking for a new game, and B, in a sci-fi mood. So I don't know how he actually, the absolute luck, he hit me at the right moment, read it, fell in love. And so we played Traveler for a bit, and the newest edition, while it is streamlined, it's very modern, it's very sleek, is very backwards compatible with old classic Traveler. And when I figured that out, because I would do this with Call of Cthulhu, it's backwards compatible too. I mean, I could just pick up old.
That's a good point.
And just play them. And so I picked up a couple of the old classic adventures. You could just pretty much play them right out of the book. So I did Nova, and I did Murder on Arcturus Station because I like a good mystery game. And I was like, what could Traveler teach me about mystery? I've been playing all these other games that have been, are known for mystery, have honed it over 40 years. They're really, really good at it. And Murder on a Tourist Station blew me away. It is so good because it's a toolkit how to make a mystery. It's highly imaginative. J. Andrew Keith was a freaking genius. So, which he wrote, the Keith brothers wrote a lot of the early Traveler stuff. They wrote so much they actually started going by pseudonyms so people wouldn't know that pretty much all of it was coming from these two guys that were pretty much writing all of JTAS under 7 or 8 different aliases.
Wow.
These guys are incredible. But Andrew Keith did that one, and I loved it. I thought it was just brilliant. Its one flaw was it opens with the Travelers have just finished a job for this jerk, and they didn't succeed. And they're kind of in this station, and this guy refuses to pay him. It's like the setup, and then the guy dies, and now they're like possible suspects, right? Well, it doesn't have an opening adventure. It just tells you that's what the start is. So I read it. I'm like, okay, well, the first thing I need to do is come up with a first adventure that meets the parameters. Like, they're looking for a ship, they never find the ringleader, and this guy's a dick. And I'll try to introduce some of the stuff. So I just wrote a mystery as an opening adventure where they're trying to find the ship. And I ended up reaching out to Matthew Sprange of Mongoose, and I said, look, I know you guys occasionally will pull some of the old stuff out of the archives and put it in for the new edition. I think this adventure is so good, I don't want it lost in time. I think you guys should update it. And he said, yeah, you want the job? And I'm like, yes. And then I also said, it also needs a prequel adventure. It doesn't have one. I wrote one. And he's like, sure, send it to me. So he sent me the... they don't have the original file, so like they pretty much had to scan the PDF, and I had to like go through the visual text thing of the PDF and update it all to not only just the new edition, but add this other adventure with it, and then rearrange everything. He said I could do any change I want. I tried to keep Murder on a Tourist Station as close to the original as possible. I made one small vanity change. I added one more suspect. But everything else I tried to keep as close to what J. Andrew Keith did. And then I had my own. So that was how it was. I approached them. They offered me the job.
Awesome.
And I had done some adventures with like Call of Cthulhu. I've done some work with Chaosium. It hasn't been released yet, even though it's been a couple of years. So they're much slower. So it's like I got to say, like I've worked with several publishers. In addition to novels, so they knew that I wasn't just some rando, that I actually knew how to work with an editor, and I understood deadlines and all that stuff. So they released it as one book called Mysteries of our Tourist Station, which is the 2 adventures. And I found out later that there actually was a prequel adventure to it. Like after I mean, I was done. I had turned it in, and I found out there was a prequel adventure. I was like, what? There was like an old JTAS magazine, like 1982. It was called Without a Trace, and it's like a page, maybe a page and a half adventure. It's an Amber Zone adventure, and these are like those little digest-sized pages, so it's pretty much like one-page adventure. But it doesn't actually meet the requirements that the sequel required. It was mostly like a one-page little adventure prompt to advertise they were going to be releasing Murder on a Tourist Station next, but it didn't actually give the setup required for the like at the end that you need for Murder on a Tourist Station. So I found this out afterwards, and like I'd originally said, like, should we change the name of the ship and should we change the NPC names? And Matthew Sprange was like, no, you wrote this with no knowledge that there had been this Amber Zone. It's a totally different thing. We're gonna keep Without a Trace itself. Might look at doing that as like an optional intro that we can expand on in one of our own JTAS magazines that we do. So it was written with no knowledge it was out there. And then they approached me about a year later for Death Station, because I had reviewed the Mark Miller's old adventure Death Station, and they wanted to do kind of to celebrate the 2022 update coming out as a free adventure that they would release around Christmas time. So they me up, said, "Would you like to?" And I was like, "Yes," and because it's a dungeon crawl horror in space, and so I just took that one. Again, they said I could do anything I wanted, and I was like, I don't want to actually go against anything that Mark originally did because it's his adventure. I would like to enhance it. I would like to, write it in a way that's easier for a modern audience to read with the rules and everything. But I want to keep it as true to Mark's story as possible because I've seen people do updates and they kind of, I don't know, I feel like they try to make it too much theirs.
Yeah.
And so I did that for that one. I ended up, it's twice as long. The text manuscript is like fiction. It's 50% longer because it was actually, they were thinking it was going to be like the same size, and I turned it this like much larger manuscript back. And so I've done that with them. But one of them I hit them up for, and the other, like, they hit me up because I'd already reviewed it and they knew I was familiar with it. And then in there I wrote one adventure, but I've updated two others.
Awesome. Yeah, that's it. So let me ask you. So I want to kind of shift towards. We talk a lot of Traveler here, like the season 2 of the podcast. That's sort of like maybe our. I don't know. That's like the central pillar that we operate from a lot. Is we've got our actual play, and then we talk about Traveler a lot. And I don't know what you think about that. This idea. I mean, obviously D&D 5e. I mean, there's no comparison. Sells, people talking about it. It's almost, you could almost say, for some people, there is just a D&D 5e hobby, and that's okay. Like, some people just want that, like, and that's what they love. It's huge, like, by comparison. That, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like, so it's a little weird.
No denying that.
Yeah, it's a little, and I'm not no shade. I'm not dissing on that at all. But the what I'm saying is, it's a little weird when I kind of compare D&D 5e to, say, Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition. But there is something like that where, basically, 1977, this game comes out, and it becomes way more popular than they expect, to the point where they're not. They're a little bit on their heels for Mega Traveler. They think, well, we're going to put this game out, and we'll move on. And then it gets this cult following. All of a sudden, you have a side of the hobby. That's been my observation, is you've got like a fantasy side, which is certainly dominant, and Dungeons and Dragons is wildly popular, even in college campuses, even in the very beginning. 1974-75 is popular, and it just stays popular for a long time. But Traveler does this in this sci-fi slice, and it just is like, I love other sci-fi games, and I've got some of my favorites, but really it's the gorilla in sci-fi. I don't know what you think about that, but and there's this huge body of work, which is another thing that's similar to D&D, right? Like, we have this whole culture, this whole archaeology at this point of D&D, where you can go back and find this body of knowledge, and Travelers like that, like, the artwork, the artists, the stuff that was written for it, the third-party products. This gigantic universe of science fiction that's out there.
Oh, like, you go to travelermap.com and it's like, good God, this is amazing. How much?
Yeah, I mean, never mind chucking a 2d6. Just go to travelermap.com and all right, there's a game. Like, you can explore, a galaxy.
So with actually one of the hobbies that I enjoy is I go through different books of the history of the industry. And Shannon Apple Klein has a brilliant series called Designers and Dragons. It's currently 4 books long. He's working on the 5th one, and it breaks the industry down by decades. And so the first book, the 1970s, follows every company that started in the 1970s, and then follows them through the end of that company, or to the present day if they're still around, which is only a few that are still around. Like TSR ended in the 90s, and then it's like, for more, get to book 3, the 90s, to follow Wizards of the Coast, to keep following D&D. So, so Traveler comes out as this little sci-fi game, just happened to be released at the same time Star Wars happened. super lucky for Mark. I mean, good job. And D&D had some similar stuff where, you know, the Gygax and company, they were really into the old sword and sorceries. They were into Conan. They were into Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and Great Mauser. They were into that sort of thing. A lot of the original Blackmore had a lot of sci-fi mixed in, where it was like, there was like, you know, you find a laser rifle and these ancient robots because we're actually in the future after humanity has fallen and somehow magic happened. You know, that was the original D&D. But Lord of the Rings was mega popular at the time, and people wanted that, and they kind of leaned into the Lord of the Rings aspect because that was just the cultural phenomenon. So you had originally hobbits that had changed into halflings. The elves were, you know, Tolkien elves, etc., and it was a hit. Well, then the Satanic Panic really pulled D&D to the forefront. Because now you had 60 Minutes, you had the Oprah Winfrey Show, you had Donahue all talking about Dungeons and Dragons. It's now on the mainstream news. And yeah, they had people talking about it nearly killed it. No, they had record sales because, there's no such thing as bad press, I guess. Sci-fi, the one thing that Traveller had working against it is a lot of people loved it when Star Wars became a hit. There was nothing else that could do sci-fi, so everybody played that, and they're pretty much playing Star Wars with Traveller. Well, then we started having the licensing stuff. You know, it was like there was a Star Trek game. People who were actually fans of Star Trek wanted to play the Star Trek game. It wasn't that great. And then fans of Star Wars, the Star Wars role-playing game came out in the 80s, and they gravitated to that. It was officially licensed. It had all sorts of stuff. And, Traveller's always just kind of been its own thing. And so with science fiction, a lot of people go to the IP property.
That's a really good point. Yeah, actually.
And some of those are good. But the original D6 Star Wars was an incredibly good system.
We love it.
Which that was, oddly enough, a system created by Sandy Peterson and Greg Stafford of Chaosium for the Ghostbusters role-playing game, which was this other licensed game. But the system they designed for Ghostbusters was so good that when WHE got the Star Wars license, they pretty much just ported it over, and it was just a brilliant system. But not all of the licensed systems are necessarily great. They're mostly selling the fact that they've got the license. But that's where you do have, like, you've got, there's a Firefly role-playing game. There is an Expanse role-playing game. There's, a Star Trek that Modiphius does. There's the Star Wars, which I can't remember who. It was like originally one company, but they changed. But they've got their own little goofy dice. So.
Star Wars?
Star Wars, yeah.
West End Games, yeah, it was the first.
It was the original, but now it's Fantasy Flight.
Oh yeah, Fantasy Flight does the Genesis system, which is the modern one, yeah.
And so with sci-fi, people still really go toward the IPs because
we hadn't thought about this. This is a good point. Is one of the things that we had been talking, we've had a few guests on talking about science fiction. That's kind of the theme of this season on the podcast, and we've been discussing this, like, how does this work? And one thing I want to get to is, like, how do we get people in? How do we get people into science fiction? But when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, I think there's this kind of common mythos, like even to this point, even in the 21st century, we still have a primordial idea of fairies and things, but I don't know that that's true. I think our shared myth of science fiction is Star Wars. It's Star Wars, Star Trek, and so that's a good point I hadn't thought about. Is then if somebody's like, well, I want to play science fiction, probably half the crowd's going to be like, well, all right, where's the Star Wars game? And they're gonna do that. And Dungeons and Dragons doesn't need to do that because You don't need an IP to have a story about dragons and fairies. You don't have to have that.
And fantasy's really ingrained in the culture, and I think that actually goes back down to Arthurian myth, which is the first popular fantasy. Which it was the first popular fantasy when there were still knights riding around. I mean, it's very ingrained in the Western culture to do that. If you go to Japan, number one tabletop role playing game in Japan, Call of Cthulhu.
Nice.
It's an investigative horror game that's very devoted to characters and mystery and the dark and supernatural. And I have a theory. There's a lot of theories. My theory is they don't have the same cultural love of fantasy the way that Western audiences do. I grew up watching, all sorts of little fantasy movies and cartoons and whatnot growing up. So there is a Euro-centric fantasy that our culture just has that we're raised on, and D&D fits that because D&D can. This is why I think D&D has lived as long as it has, because it got its big popularity through different forms. But the reason I think it's kind of kept its title as the king is it can do, if you want to play Lord of the Rings, you can do Lord of the Rings with it. Usually Gandalf kind of bends the rules in Wizards, but you could also do like Willow, or you could do lots of stuff. You can use their pre-made worlds, which they had a lot of back in the 90s. They're growing that catalog again, or you can just make up your own. And a dungeon master can be all like, cool, I'm just going to draw a little continent, and this is the land of whatever, and these are my kingdoms, and you build a little world, and they play in it. So it's not tied to the setting. It's just a fantasy game, and it's got a pre-made world, or worlds if you want them, or here's all the tools to make up your own. Go and have fun. So it has that versatility of, I can use a catalog of 10 billion words and play in the world of Drizzt and all of them, and Dragonlance, or I can just make up my own fantasy land. With science fiction, people will go to those different IPs. Some of those games are really good at specifically what they do. Some of them are just really good for art for the IP, and they might not be the best game. But like Alien, that Free League did. If you want to play a game that is exactly like an Alien movie, you will not find a better game. It is exactly like an Alien movie. It is the only game I've ever played in my life where I was afraid of running out of air. I mean, it is great. But that is all it's really good at.
That's a good point.
You don't have that versatility of, I can do anything. Traveler, like you and I connect on, like it's like Firefly, but with aliens, and it's like, oh, sign me up. It's also The Expanse. It's also Battlestar Galactica. It's also Star Wars. It's also Starship Troopers.
Buck Rogers, if you want to have a 10-ton computer and you beat boppy robots and stuff, and it's pulp sci-fi too, and you can have but
it can do it all without changing the rules. Right. You don't have to like modify it to do any of that. You just do it. The Deep Night Endeavor campaign, it's Star Trek. You're a giant crew of like 400 people on a giant ship that is going off into like the unexplored on a 10-year mission. That's freaking Star Trek. They don't worry about trade. You're not worried about all the little stuff that you'd worry about in like a little trader game that you're doing like Firefly. It's the exact same game. There's no special rules difference.
It sounds like you've solved the question. I don't know if it's the solution we ultimately want per se. It's interesting. Like, it makes me think of when Mark Miller talked about the transition into Mega Traveler, and from 1977 to 78, what happened. Because in 77, he had written Imperium, and he had this. So the setting is implied, and I don't have my book with me. It's back there, but in Traveler, he creates, in my opinion, this ingenious way he's like, all right, how does this game work? I have 2d6s. And he makes everything in the entire universe drive off 2d6s. You got a person, 2d6s, 6 stats. You got a planet, a bunch of stats, 2d6s. You got a sector, 2d6s, a bunch of stats. And it fractals from 2d6s. You got a starship, it's got a bunch of stats, 2d6s. Like, it's genius. It's unbelievable. And yeah, you can have Star Wars with it. But I think they were unprepared, right? So here they make this game. And then people say, oh my gosh, I want adventures. And Mark Miller's like, wait a second. That's not what we're doing on these campuses. We're simulationists. We're war gamers. I build universes. I see how, like, these aren't the books I'm reading, but everybody watches Star Wars and they say, we want adventures. So there's this really weird thing where you have Traveler in 1977, and it is entirely improvisational. And there's skills that have 3 paragraphs for a skill, and it'll say, forward observer, maybe, you get like start out with a +5, but then like the referee might do this, and it's a conversation. And then another skill, it might tell you nothing, and then another skill, it might give you a math thing. It's very world-facing. And so it's for the simulationist. And then by 1978, they release their first, their product line, including the setting. And all of a sudden, you've got adventures. Some of the adventures are like, they're written like a novel. And what I mean is, like, you're going to do this, and then the characters will do this, and then the characters will do this. And it, it's a railroad, we would call it. But that's what people wanted. So there's an interesting kind of dissonance between what the designers initially intended and then what the consumers are like, no, we want this. And I bring that up because if Mongoose got the license for some sci-fi properties, if they could do Traveler : Star Wars, there you go. They'd sell Star Wars, or they'd sell Traveler. But it would change it. It'd be different. It'd be less of a premise of, well, you do whatever you want with this.
So Mongoose is branching off because they've got the 2300 AD, which is using the Traveler rules, and that actually was an original spin-off. And that, if you want something like The Expanse, that's it. But it's going to uses the same rules. I haven't really checked it out because I'm playing Traveler. I'm enjoying it, but it's like pre-jump drive sort of thing. And it actually is a spin-off of Twilight 2000, which was the old post-World War III, post-World War III game.
I played it once, yeah.
What happens in the future? I played a few games of it a long time ago. How long ago? Because when 9/11 happened, we suddenly lost the mood to play the post-World War III game.
Yeah.
So it's like that was like the end of it, and then they released the new edition, and Russia invaded Ukraine like the next week. So it's like, a lot of people who were looking forward to it just suddenly have that. It's a little too real all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But with
so you say they have plans though to split off and try to.
They have plans. With a lot of the old games, and this is like all of D&D had the same thing. Where we're just giving you a toolbox to make up your own
That's
stuff.
true.
And people were like, I want games. And they're like, we don't really know how to do it. So like even the old D&D modules that they would release were pretty crappy by today's standards. They were very railroady. They were very wargamey, because no one's ever done this before. Like they're literally making this up as they go, and so a lot of their stuff was absolutely brilliant, considering the fact that they were blazing a trail.
Totally, yeah. And certainly not all of them there was a diversity of creators. So I think of I'm looking at Belt Strike for this week, and Belt Strike is to me it just blows my mind. It's they could just release it tomorrow with the same text and updated art, and it'd be like an ingenious thing. Or what's that one? The one where you're in a prison. Do you remember that one?
Prison Planet.
Prison Planet, you could release that as an indie OSR title today. And it'd be like,
I'm going to say that was a Traveler adventure. Have you ever read the original Traveler adventure, Prison Planet?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's mind-boggling. I'm saying you could release it today, and it would be, it's ready to go. Like, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
That is one that in our current campaign I had to actually keep in the pipe because I needed my characters, I needed the players to get away from the Imperium authorities at one point. And the adventure we're doing assumes they'll run, and I don't assume they're going to run. I'm like, okay, backup plans. We got to have some backup plans. So
that's awesome.
If they get captured, I can have these openings for them to seize and get away. Okay, let's say they don't take those, or they take those, they fail. What do we do? Do we end the campaign? No. Oh, let me dust off Prison Planet. Okay, so we're going to do Prison Planet. If worst case scenario, and thankfully, when the Imperium came for them, they stole the starship and flew off. Continued on their campaign, and afterwards,
you got
I'm
it
like,
ready.
Oh man, I was like,
hey, skip a couple of mortgage payments, and here we go. We're ready. We're ready for this.
So, but that's also years of experience of like, yeah, I know what the adventure is really trying to push them to do. I know my players, and it's not that they intentionally reject what I deep down hope they do. I think on a deep psychic, not even subconscious, a psychic level, they know what I want, and they want to watch me squirm.
Okay, so D&D though, it has this renaissance 2015, and I would say it turns a corner, and all of a sudden this thing explodes 5-10 times what it was. Obviously there's some variables to that. Is there a sci-fi renaissance? Could there be a traveler renaissance? And if not, why? What's keeping that from happening? Sounds like licensing is part of what fractures it, but could it happen?
Licensing, well, this is weird. When you look at the things Traveler has directly or indirectly inspired, it is absolutely astounding. Did you know that Firefly, it was originally said it was based off of a Traveler game that Joss Whedon played when he was in Oxford. And then he later's like, no, that's it, because there'd be legal reasons. But in the very first episode, one of the characters, Wash, just does like, hold on, travelers, which is a weird line that he gives, and they never say that again. The Expanse, the novels, and the TV show. It was
intended to be a tabletop role-playing game.
It was. And when they talk about certain things that happen in the game and why, and then they had to like kind of finagle it weird so it would make sense in the books. But like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Expanse.
I love it. Yeah.
When they're about to crash the ship into the big asteroid, the GM's like wanting them, like, you're supposed to go inside the asteroid. You're supposed to go inside the asteroid. Okay, they stole a giant colossal ship, and they're just going to ram the asteroid of the ship. You know what? The asteroid moves. How's that move? I don't know. Maybe you should go inside the freaking asteroid.
Space magic.
Yeah, space
Ancient
magic.
Aliens.
And so they had to like kind of rewrite the plot to justify the GM's all like, you are not taking out my dungeon, you bastards. It moves.
That's great.
Or Miller, at one point, they capture the bad guy. They're supposed to get the information to Miller, just murder hobos him. And
That's
so
good. Yeah.
They rewrite it to where he's like, I didn't like the fact he was making sense. Like they made him sound badass, but really it was yet a murder hobo player. It was like, you son of a bitch, bam. And so they did that. The new video game Starfield.
You do that with your novels, right? Some of it, your games inform your novels, right?
There's a pretty wide separation.
I don't want to overplay that, but like
there are certain things that like certain things in a game will inspire my novels, or games I'm writing are inspired by what I happen to be writing at the time. So I've had that, but the new video game Starfield that came out earlier this year, the creator has outright said Traveler was one of his biggest inspirations. And if you play Starfield, it is really, really clear there is Traveler influence.
One of the things that it fascinates me to go even further, because I'm a fan of science fiction video games, is really I'll make a really bold statement here, but I think it's a safe one, and I can draw these dots. Is Traveler, not just the 2d6, not just having a bell curve result based on skills, which in its own right is a revolution, but then having a physics-based game where you're going to have flip and burns, force equals mass times acceleration, distance equals rate times time, and you're going to have, the effects of gravity, all that kind of stuff. The math and the simulation is there in the text to where you can have it. And then it's beautifully fractally done, like how many credits you're going to get for this type of thing, how long it's going to take. You're going to spend 1 week in solar system, 1 week in jump, like 168 hours in jump. Everything lends itself to be entirely a game and entirely a sci-fi simulator. And what do we get? 1984, Elite. What do we get out of Elite? Every space combat simulator ever. Wing Commander, X-Wing TIE Fighter, everything now. So Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous. If you're into science fiction, in some ways, thanks Traveler. It's unbelievable.
Well, and a lot of it was because they were old war gamers, and it just kind of like they were making war games that somehow got distracted, and they kind of invented role playing games on the side. But it was they're all old school war gamers, and that's how they approached it. So there was that simulationist aspect to it. I think out of all the stuff that Miller did when he created Traveler, the hands down most genius to me is the world profile, where he can summarize
it's genius
at a couple digits. I am forever blown away at just how brilliant that is. And there's a lot of like the old grognards. They can just read that number, like they can just read it, and I have to flip through all the books and so the third number is that the hydro? Is that
But look at that fractal pattern, right? Because your UPP, in UPP, for people listening, you've got a thing for people, which is the same as Dungeons and Dragons, and Mark Miller said that. So strength, dexterity, constitution, etc., right? And what is it? It's 6 stats. You've got a D6. It's generated on a 2D6. So it fractals out from this math. And you have physical, and then from physical it goes into more diffuse things, like your character and your mental state and stuff. Well, what does the planet do in the world profile? It starts with its physical information, and it moves into politics. It's a Traveler character, but it's a planet, and then a sector does that. It's just mind blowing.
My only criticism of the manga's rules, a part of it is they're trying to stay very true to Traveler, the original. It is backwards compatible. Is the Soch stat? I wish we would just make that charisma and just be done with it, because Soch is such a weird stat. Because it's like charisma, but it's also your social rank. It's like, could we just have those be separate things?
It's like D&D, right? Because it has this basis in pulp sci-fi, but are we ready to let go of that to make something broader? And yeah, it's a tension, but.
I think that's the one thing holding. We pretty much treat it like it's your charisma. It just also happens to be social rank, but it's more of your charisma because social. They have to know who you are. If your characters are in disguise, your social is whatever. It drops away.
Right.
But it's an essential stat. So, and then a lot of the ways you use it, it's clearly intended in a charismatic sense.
Right.
So I think that Soch is the one thing, if I was ever going to be allowed to really play with the rules, that would be the most dramatic change. It's pretty much like the Soch is your social ability and done. I wouldn't even change the name of it.
Yeah. No, you can't. No. Yeah.
But it would just be your social aptitude of what it meant, because you have your intellect, your education, your social aptitude done, and it's treated that way, but it's not exactly what it is. So it's the one spot that kind of gets a little weird.
Yeah, and I could see why, because in the original game, essentially, you had a different relationship with your stats. But in the modern game, you have a discrete thing across the board. So, and it's player facing. So a player can a player can roll dice from the character sheet to do something, to activate something. So if that's the case, that purpose for the social stat is no longer what it was in 1977. So, yeah, indeed. Okay, so As usual, I got really excited talking about role-playing games, and we've gone on, and I missed some things. I won't be able to get to,
Oh
but,
man, let's burn through them. I'm
yeah,
enjoying
no,
this.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I really appreciate you chatting with me about it. There's a couple of things I wanna ask before we go. One of them is, so we talked about skill-based RPGs, and that there's this whole world out there. There's this, aspect of the hobby, and it's one of them things where you mentioned Powered by the Apocalypse, and yeah, it's not for everybody, but it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, but just try it. Like, just try it out. It's cool, This is one of those things that's even bigger than that. Like, to me, if you're into tabletop role-playing games, you like your Dungeons and Dragons, man, try out Call of Cthulhu. You can't not try Call of Cthulhu. It's so good.
And with that, the BRP system that it uses originally came from
the system is good too. That's right.
Oh, the BRP system is amazing. And when you're also talking about influences, Cyberpunk 2020, Mike Pondsmith is well on record saying is Traveler.
Wow.
It is a near future. It is very much based on it. That's why it also has a life path and stuff. And it works differently. But he introduced to the tabletop world the concept of like Cyberpunk, which then gave us Shadowrun and a lot of stuff, where all of a sudden computers weren't giant things that filled rooms. Computers you can install in your head and you can get on the internet. And, we can get cyber limbs and stuff. Well, if you look at the current edition Central Supply catalog, all that stuff is there.
Yeah.
We joked with my players because whenever they're in a mood for like old school Cyberpunk, it's like, why don't we just play Traveler and we'll just remove going to space? We'll literally drop you on like a font.
Oh yeah, no, you could absolutely do that. Yeah.
And we could literally do an entire campaign on the planet Afate, which is a high tech level, low law level, corporate type run world. It's
awesome.
It's Night City on a planetary scale. We could just do that and just acknowledge the rest of the Traveler universe is there, but you guys just live in the cities. And it would port perfectly. So
yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and so we've got these skill-based games. I'm going to put some links in the description for some of these things, as well as for your channel and your website, so they can find your other products and different things you're doing. We talked. I had to talk to you about Traveler. That's a little bit of like a side thing, but I'm just too obsessed with it, and so I wanted to talk to you about Traveler. But if somebody, I usually always ask this question. Somebody's they're one of two things. They're in the brand game. They're in that big and game, and they're going to. I see people ask this question constantly, and they're about to make that step out somewhere, or they're brand new. And I see this question a lot too. Either they're brand new in one of two ways. You got young people that come up in the hobby and they want to try it out, and they're 19 years old and they're like, all right, I want to try this out. You also have people, they're becoming an empty nester. Their kids are getting older, and they're like, I maybe tried this a long time ago, but I haven't touched it in 40 years. And they're about to lay their hands on Traveler or Call of Cthulhu. What would be your advice to them? If they're making that step, like what do you think they should do?
Well,
and how do you help them? Like, if you have friends and they're like, oh, Seth Skorkowsky, like you're, I don't know, like if you have that where you got family and they're not into tabletop games and they're like, oh yeah, our relative Seth, he's got this channel, and then one of your cousins like, I will try this, and like if you're totally introducing someone new, how do you do that? Like,
Well, these days there are so many starter sets. Starter sets is one of the areas I think was neglected for so long, and like a lot of the games have just amazing incredible starter sets. I usually get that because it's got everything you need right there. And even if you're going to get the full book, I still sometimes recommend get the starter set just because it's got so much great stuff. Like Call of Cthulhu, I tell people just get the starter set. It will baby step you in. It's got some of the best
It's a good
features in it. Traveler.
I've run Edge of Darkness like 3 times. It's so good. It's worth just getting the starter set. And I have both. I've got 8th edition. I've got the starter set because like the starter set is just worth getting. Period.
Oh no, it's got some fantastic adventures in it. Some of their chaos seems very best. They've updated it, and it's glorious. Even if you get the full rulebook, I still get that starter set. It's got some sweet stuff. Traveler, I think, missed the mark because they did their starter set originally, Mongoose, but it was actually just the full rulebook in a box that had like a couple stuff, had like a little campaign in it, but it was actually the full rulebook. It didn't kind of baby step yet. It was a really badass starter set, but it wasn't what I would consider a good introducing sort of starter set. They actually have done that now, so a lot of the games have those, and I just recommend them because like this will do it for you because it will baby step you in. I usually recommend when people are starting off a new game, like I don't know if we started recording yet, like make your characters with the understanding your second character will be great because you'll know what to do. But make that first character and you will learn a lot. Just have fun. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't start off with a huge campaign. It honest to God drives me insane whenever people are like, oh, I saw your stuff and I want to play Call of Cthulhu, so I picked up Massive Nyarlathotep, 600 pages, and is known to take 2 years on average to run, and we are going to learn to play Call of Cthulhu with this massive commitment. I'm like, what are you doing? Play Edge of Darkness, play The Haunting, play some of these little, play some little snares, learn what you like, make all your mistakes because you're going to make them, you learn your learning curve, and then once you guys know this is what you like, and you know what you like about it and what you don't like, and you got all your stuff down, then you can open up that 2-year campaign. So like people do that Traveler, they're like, oh man, I want to play this game, so I picked up Pirates of Drinax. I'm like, no, do Flatlined, do Death Station, do.
I mean, I for one have never done that. I mean, I definitely didn't start learning Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and started Tyranny of Dragons. That's definitely.
and I think D&D did that.
That's
and
true.
A lot of people came in believing that that's how you're supposed to do it. And it's like, no, that's not how I ever recommend doing it.
But this is a really good point, it seems like to me, that even if you do that, even if you want to, because maybe some people they'll just say, look, I just want to do this. Okay. It seems like a good way to start doing that is to have some kind of little, I think Matt Colville calls it a danger room. Like have a place where you can go in and just totally test it out and figure out where it works for you and where it doesn't, and figure things out first and get your footing, and then launch out from there. It just seems like a good launching point.
Yeah, and I'd usually, so anytime I've learned a new game, I've had a system in place for years. It's pretty much always been done the same. It's like when I'm learning the rules, I make a character as I'm reading the book, because that's how you learn. Because then as you're introduced to rules, you can look at your character that you just made and be like, oh, I can see how I can do that. I grab my buddy Jesse, and we do what we call fight practice. And fight practice literally has us going through the combat system, and it's like we start off with fists, and then we upgrade to knives, and then we're upgraded to auto shotguns as various cover and like 2 bad guys. Try to figure all this out, and it's pretty much live, die, repeat. Like there's no XPs. Death isn't permanent. We're just literally, the whole world is an alley. And there's a crate here that you can use for cover, and there's this, and we go through it over and over until we kind of get it down. And then we start trying to use some of the weird stuff, like some of the different grappling options, or let's do some armor piercing ability or whatnot. And then I run like a 1 or 2 player game as let me kind of fumble my way through this, because we're gonna stop and have to check the book a lot, and I would like 2 people to be the ones that endure my learning curve, because if I've got a whole table of people that are all rapid firing questions at me, it's a lot harder than if I've got 1 or 2. But then once we've done that, and I'm like, okay, let's get a group together, and we've got like 5 players or whatnot. I now have 2 players who kind of know how to do this as well as me, and they can help me help the new guys figure it all out. So that's how I've always approached it. It's like I get one. We're just going to go through so many games are make or break by their combat system. That's when a player needs to know the most rules in is combat, really, because there's so many different things going on. And so I've got one. We've practiced that over and over again with 0 consequence. And we've tried like a little game with 1 or 2 people, and then that whoever played that is going to assist me in helping everybody else learn the rest of this game. Because if somebody has a question, I'm not the only one that knows the answer. And since I'm new, I don't know the answer probably, but 1 or 2 other people that can help do that as we all learn this game together. And also know you're gonna mess up. Be honest, guys. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna get rules wrong. No big deal. We'll learn them. So a lot of the times, our early games with whatever system it is, after it's over, and I read the rule book, and I'm like, oh yeah, we messed that up. Cool. And I'll just tell them before the next game starts, like, hey guys, going forward, made a mistake. Whoops. And we now know. And that's it. No harm, no foul. Because we're learning this together. And I think also if you do treat it as we are learning this together, the players are much more excited to help learn it with you than if you come in like, I will teach this to you. Now they're the students and you are the mentor, and their job isn't to help you teach. Their job is to learn. I think if you come in with like, we are going to do this together and we're going to have a blast, that we is very powerful because they're excited to help you and everybody else learn this because this is now a group project. So
Yeah. It also seems like it solves a major problem that I've seen over and over and over again. I regret to say I've probably seen probably 2 or 3 dozen games try to get started, never get started, and then they never play again. I hate to make it sound so grim, but I've seen this happen, and it's related to what you say. Is somebody has the BDC, the big dang campaign they're going to do, and they prepare all of it. And they're excited about it, which is why they prepare it. And then something causes it to fall apart, which happens in tabletop role-playing games. It could be schedules, it could be personalities, it could be something outside of your control. Illness, literally someone moving away, or it could be that people start playing it and they just don't like it. And I can give a kind of a tale of 2 games in this way, because they're both fairly complex games, and I love both of them. They're awesome games. Rogue Trader, you can see our actual plays of both of these. Rogue Trader and Mutineer Zero. Love them both. They're amazing. Rogue Trader, I knew going in that it was very complex. So I was like, all right, I did what you said, took your advice, and I was like, all right, let's dabble. Let's do a little bit. We're going to do this little intro scenario using the quick start rules. I don't know what I'm doing. Help me out here, and let's learn together. And we had a good time. We got to the end of the quick start rules, and I was surprised because I like Warhammer, but I don't usually like complex rules. So I was like, I probably won't like this. I can get to the end of it, and I'm like, man, this is really cool. And I realized there's all these special rules about trade and everything. And the players were like, nah, I don't really like it that much. And now these are people I play with all the time. And I was like, oh. But I had not prepared some huge BDC, some big dang campaign. So I'm like, all right, no sweat it. And we went on and did something else. Example 2, Mutineer Zero, I read the whole book. And I prepared, Now, Free League, which I highly recommend their games, do most of the preparation for you. It's unbelievable. You buy one of their box sets or one of their games, and it's already done for you. Yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. So I can't complain too much because I was really spoiled. But I put a lot of elbow grease into it, and I double purchased. I purchased the hard copy because I was excited about it. I purchased the VTT Foundry set, so everything was in Foundry, and I found music that fit it and all this kind of stuff. I thought I had players that were really excited about it. We get about 3 or 4 sessions in, I didn't like it. Now, I liked the game, but I didn't like the vibe, the setup. We had a player. These are kind of things that are hard to quantify, but I had like a friend that I was excited about playing with. Two of them. One of them couldn't play, suddenly dropped out. It's weird how something like that can take the wind out of your sails. That's no shade on other players or the game, but it's like, man, I was so excited to play with my friend. And then like another friend like missed 3 sessions and eventually he's like, hey man, I'm sorry, I guess it's just not working. And, you know, after you kind of have the wind taken out of you, so it had nothing to do with the players or the game or whatever. But here it is, I had put so much elbow grease into this game on the front end. And guess what? 3 sessions in, it didn't work out. So anyways, it seems like what you're saying, you do a little dabbling first, and you could work all that out in advance. You might even figure out, like, hey, Conan 2D20, this rule book is really hard to read, and it's becoming a problem. I like this game, and I love Conan, but man, I don't know. We'll just go back to the AD&D modules for this or something, or Hyperborea or something, whatever it is.
Like one of the things that we also have is if the GM is excited about it.
Yeah,
like you know, because when we, you know, basically what I spent years refusing to leave D&D, and all of a sudden I became the guy that was all like, cool, let's try this game, you know, like, just, you know, I gotta make up for lost times. You know, my players had to endure that, and when we were looking at flipping to 70 Call of Cthulhu, they were initially hesitant to like say, like, guys, I am excited, and they understood, like, you know, because for a while, like, you know, I've been doing D&D, and I just started autopiloting it because I wasn't excited about it anymore. Like, I was doing it, and we were having fun, but I was just kind of coasting. My heart wasn't into it, and they could tell it wasn't into it. But, you know, they were enjoying it, so this is what we do. But then I got excited about it, and that becomes that's essential. And I think a lot of times when I hear GMs talk about, like, I want to play this, but my players won't let me, it's like, you need to explain also where your heart is, because an excited GM is amazing versus a GM that's doing it to make them happy. So yeah, and sometimes campaigns just fall apart for various reasons. I've had a few die just because of life, and, you know, like, one person just wasn't quite getting out of it what the rest of us were, and it just wasn't meshing, and, you know, that sort of thing. And that's, you know, that happens. But one of the big things I like to say is, like, if everyone is more of like, we're about the people, our group is the people. We hang out with our friends. We just kind of figure out what game it is we're going to be playing, and we're going to be committing a bunch of time to. But it's also our excuse to hang out with a bunch of friends and laugh and just be a bunch of kids, because that's why we game. And so the game that we're playing, the game is important. The game's essential. What game it is isn't as important as we are doing this with our friends. And that the idea of, like, this is the one the GM is excited about and is going to put all those extra pieces of work in, because they're not going to think of it as work. You know, like, they want to. That's going to be a much cooler game. They're going to excitedly go through a lot of rules to make sure we get those rules right before the game, because we want the game to be perfect, because they're excited about it. Is very different than the GM that's kind of going through the motions.
Right.
And that was actually the big one. And when I discovered Traveler, my pitch to him was like, guys, I haven't been this excited about a game since I found Call of Cthulhu. They're like, well, hell, let's see what this is, because it was I am about to consume these rules, and I'm going to gleefully put together cheat sheets, and I'm going to gleefully, you know, make sure that when we play, it's going to be amazing, because I am excited about it, versus, hey, let's try this out, let's see if it works. You know, we'll make some mistakes, but oh well.
Yeah.
And so my players did figure that one out. And I don't know. I don't like to badmouth games. Like, it's like, 5e is not my jam. I don't make a secret about that. I'm not going to go out there and like tell people it sucks, because my memories with like D&D, I wouldn't trade those for the world. We had so much fun, and then we decided it wasn't the system for us anymore. We moved on. I'm not going to sit around and tell people like that game sucks or something, because the emotions that they have and the memories that they have that are related to it are 100% real. And if that's what they want to play, then great. So I'm not gonna knock them, but at the same time, it's like, well, there's games that I prefer. And you might too, but I'm not going to tell you that you're not having fun, right?
Yeah. So, GM side, express your excitement and your actually share your feelings. Do it. Be like, man, this reminds me of this thing. This is why I'm so excited about it. Actually, talk about it. Don't catfish your friends, right? Don't do the thing where I see that sometimes where they're like, oh, just tell them it's D&D and don't worry about it. No, just actually actually tell them what's going on and why, and what you want to do. But on the player side, maybe like also support your friends. Like if your friend wants to DM something, just do it. I had that experience. My friend wanted to run Monster of the Week, which at the time I was not interested in the game system, Monster of the Week. I don't want to. I hope this doesn't offend. I'm not that into horror, actually. Now, doesn't matter because the experience of horror, like in Call of Cthulhu, is so thrilling that I've even ran it because I love it so much. But I if somebody was like, hey, let's do a horror campaign, I'd be like, I don't really want to. And he did Monster of the Week, and he wanted to do a horror campaign, and I was like, Joel, usually I'm not into that, but you're so excited about it, and I just want to hang out with you. And that was the truth. And then it was like one of my favorite campaigns ever. And I was like, this is amazing. It was a space western horror, like a planet hopping investigation space western horror. It was mind blowing. I loved it so much. And if I didn't have that openness to experience, first of all, I would have never experienced that. And second of all, I wouldn't have gotten to connect with my friend. And so, so if you're a player, man, out there, let your friend run the game. Like, try it out. Like, yeah.
No, and like I'll play different games that my friends run, even if it's not necessarily a system I enjoy, just because it's what they're excited about. We're gonna have fun,
right? Yeah.
And I have legitimate great time. But yeah, if they ask, like, well, would you rather we play this other game? Yeah, but I'm not telling you to stop.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Because I am legitimately having fun. It's just not my preferred medium of game. But that's fine. It's like I don't consider Call of Cthulhu like a horror game. Like I really downplay the horror part. To me, it's an investigative.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like it's an investigative game that there's a little bit, there's some horror, but it's mostly to be investigative because I love the aspect of solving the mysteries and the clues and the puzzles.
That's as a player, that's probably my favorite. Like I call it peeling back the onion, and I'm taking notes and I'm drawing connections. It's so thrilling. As a player, it's probably top place, and that's competing with exploration, so that's a tough one. But I love investigating stuff.
So that's it really is. It's like I like horror gaming. Like I love Cult, and that's a straight out horror game. But to me, Call of Cthulhu is primarily investigation with kind of through a horror lens or filter or something, but it's actually about the investigation. But like when we were doing like our Earl Pulp game that was using the interlock system, my pitch to one of my friends, I thought he'd be the hardest sell. I really did. But before I get into a game, I also consume massive amounts of media that gets me in the mood for it. So I happened to be watching, it's one of my favorite movies, but I was watching the Brendan Fraser 99 Mummy. And he was going to come over and hang out, and at some point, like during like dinner or something, I was going to kind of pitch this pulp game I was thinking about doing, and it was like right in the part of that movie where they're all strapped to the biplane and the big sandstorm comes up behind them with the face. And Brendan Fraser grabs the Lewis gun and opens up fire. And my buddy is a huge old gun nut. Is like, oh man, Lewis guns and stuff like that. He's like really getting into it. I was like, shit, here's my opening. I'm like, hey man, I was thinking about playing a game where we could do this exact scene. And he was like, really? Like, yeah, like exactly like this. Lewis guns, biplanes, the whole deal. Going through old ancient ruins and getting chased by mummies. And he was like, sold. So he was actually my easiest sell. But it was only because I happened to have the mummy on. Because I was getting myself all, into the mood for it. I was watching that and like Indiana Jones and the old Tales of the Golden Monkey and stuff. He happened in at that moment. I'm like, here's my window.
That's awesome.
That. And, so, if I was going to be pitching Traveler, if I would probably have to do the same thing, but with whatever flavor of Traveler it was. So if like we're doing like classic traders, like, oh, Firefly's up. Or I might have Star Wars up. Or I might have Battlestar Galactica up and be like, hey, I was thinking about doing a game that's just like that. And once they can see this is the direction we're going and the types of things and that, they're suddenly a lot easier to talk into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, Seth, I love talking about RPGs with you. It's really nice to meet you. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting about it. I'm going to include, as I said, in the description, a link to your channel, to your website, and if I don't fit it in the description, a few of these RPGs that we talked about, so people can peruse those. Do you have any upcoming projects or announcements or anything that you want to share?
Man, I do, but I can't talk about them yet because the publishers haven't.
That's even better. That's
even better.
Announced
Be
like,
it, so,
oh yeah, there's
some
something
stuff
coming. Just stay tuned. That's great.
I mean, the only stuff like when it comes like to the channel is depending on how it goes. Is I occasionally do what I call these campaign diaries, where when we do play a long form campaign, instead of it being a review video, I break it out over an entire series. But I also put the twist on of like we're following the characters. It's much more personalized for these are the characters we went through, and I kind of actually recreate certain scenes with these little characters. I did that, like Pulp Cthulhu did the Two-Headed Serpent. It was like 9 episodes long. And Traveler, I did one called the Mystery BT SHT 365. We follow a group of people going through it, and then I'm also reviewing the adventure and how I changed it and why we did certain things.
Yeah, I love those narrative-based ones. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Hopefully this year I will be starting my one for Secrets of the Ancients, but we have to get further into it. Right now, we are on chapter 3. I need to be done with chapter 6 at least before I begin doing a series, because I don't know if they're going to get killed in the next session. Who knows? But
wow, yeah.
But we're also 18 hours into chapter 3, and we are finally about to get to it because large portions of that campaign are like, okay, well the travelers need to get from here to here. They could go any which way they want. Come back when they get there. Here's some ideas of what might happen along the way. And chapter 3 is one of those chapters, so it's like we've had 2 very long sessions of like 8 hours plus sessions of literally just getting from one planet to another and all of their antics along the way. And they're finally this Saturday going to get to the actual mission. So they're like, well, when you finish chapter 6, like, I don't know, at this rate, like 2080. But that one I've actually already started building. I've started actually working on the videos, like, because I have to build props and doing costumes and stuff. They're actually big deals.
Right.
So. But I need to make sure we're deep enough into it that I don't have to like start the series and then take a gap of 6 months as we're waiting for the next adventure to be done. I need to be mostly done with the adventure. And then B, I also want to guarantee they make it far enough along and not just die, because that would really stink. If it's like, and then in chapter 3 they crashed a ship. Anyways, that was it. Even though there was 10 chapters. So either when we finish chapter 6 or 7, I'll be kicking that off as a massive series, because we're doing Secrets of the Ancients. Brilliant adventure. Has some problems. Brilliant adventure. I've been trying to fix them, and I'll be also doing kind of a how-to guide of how and why I made certain changes to.
Wow, that's very exciting. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to pivot over to traveler stuff in my hobby. I just think it's it's like a whole world of stuff, and we're doing classic traveler, so we have a Thursday night campaign, Spinward Marches, free trader kind of thing. But I would also like to do some, dedicated scenario things and like a campaign thing, not just. I mean, we're living the Firefly dream. We're doing it. It's amazing for me, at least. I love it. But also, there's this whole other world of
Well, I'll give you the pitch of Secrets of the Ancients.
Yeah, do it.
It's great. Okay, so it was originally a module in the 1980s.
Because that's true. Actually, some people might not know what you're referring
called
to. So yeah,
Secret Singular of the Ancients, and it was like a 42-page digest-sized little module. Well, then Mongoose got the rights to publish Traveler, and they hired a guy named. I'm not looking at it, so this is by memory. Gareth Hanrahan, who took that little bitty module and he blew it up into like a 200-page campaign called Secrets, plural, of the Ancients. And it is now 10 adventures long. But what makes it really cool is each adventure has a different theme. Like, one of them is like conspiracy espionage murder mystery. That another is this high role play as you're trying to navigate a social situation where people have hidden agendas, and then you're fugitives from justice, and then you're in another world, and then we're doing a prison break, and then we're doing a 1970s disaster movie, and it's just it blows up into the most insane thing. But at the time when I was looking for a long form campaign, I read multiple campaigns from multiple systems, and none of them were quite hitting what it is I needed. And it was like, I don't want it to be a big 2-year job, so I'm going to rule all of those mega 2-year campaigns out. I wanted it to be about 8 to 9 scenarios. 9 was my max, and I ended up with one that was 10. But when I was reading, I was like, this reads like a Call of Cthulhu scenario. Well, Gareth Hanrahan also used to write for Delta Green and Trail of Cthulhu and stuff. So it's like, oh, that's why it has that flavor mixed in, like that investigative sort of style. But it's in the Traveler world. It's in the Spinward Marches. And of all the movies I would compare it to, if you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 3, it is so eerily similar to large portions of that movie. I don't know if they got inspiration from the same spot or if Marvel owes Mongoose money, because we're talking hyper specific stuff where I'm like, the whole time I'm watching it going I can't tell my friends. I'm like, geez, this is exactly like, oh yeah, we haven't gotten there yet. I'll just wait until we get to the fact that it is very but yeah, it starts off with kind of like your little traders, and you're doing your kind of on the sketchy side of the law, maybe, you could either destroy, save, or conquer the universe. That's it is as epic as they get.
That's awesome.
And it's got problems. It's got a few issues where it gets real railroady at parts or makes some assumptions. I'm working on those before we get to them, but we're having an absolute freaking blast, man. It's
wow. I'm very excited about these videos then. Cool. Well, yeah, Seth, thank you so much for joining us and talking to me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah. Mythic Mountains RPG is a private online play club that focuses on folk RPGs. Folk RPGs are the games that belong to all of us. They're what actually happens at a table between friends. It's their voice that has the authority on what is fun and what works for them. Weekly, we upload our games to allow others to sit in with us. The channel isn't monetized. We don't own the artwork, music, software, or games shown in these actual plays, and you can find links to their authors in the description. Like, subscribe, and share if you wish, or don't. Just like games in person, you're welcome to pull up a chair, sit in, and watch some of our games. No performances, no fancy equipment, just regular people playing folk pencil and paper role-playing games and having a good time. We hope these games will prove a source of enjoyment to anyone just wanting to listen in, anyone looking for examples of how actual groups run and play folk RPGs, and most importantly, if you haven't found your group yet, you're welcome here at ours.